Hey guys, my name is Matt Pinchnot. I am a social studies teacher at Gilligan High School. I work with mostly 11th and 12th graders through teaching U.S. history and taught public policy before, but I interact with students across all 4 grades with my work in our school's focus program. So for today, and the topic of our artifacts, I'm going to cheat because something that's really big about me is I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. I'm not exactly the biggest fan of rules. So I brought 2 things. And the first of which is this necklace. The second, this hat, but it really can be any hat, because what matters is when kids see me putting on this necklace and they see me taking out a hat, throwing it on, you know that we just went from Mr. P to Lil Pinch. And we're about to, go from doing some French and Indian War rule simulation. So now we're going to be looking at the cause of the revolution from the lens of British and Americans through a remix of J. Cole's Tale of Two Cities. And yes, I do have the kids join my performances. For that one specifically, I have them all grab like a sheet of white paper and give them the lyrics of the song and they're waving back and forth like, and the flags in the air. So it's really just me trying to scratch my but on a serious note, the reason why I chose these 2 artifacts, hat and this, is because it's a reminder for me of one of the things I love most about teaching, and that's the freedom to be myself, and that education doesn't have to fit in a box. And that's something I try to keep in mind, not only for myself, but for my students. That I want to be able to express myself as an educator in a way that's authentic to who I am. And even though I wish I was actually good enough for effort to be one, or just really good at like anything, it allows me to go into one of my passions. And one of my focal points is to bring out the passions of my students as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Young, and I'm a middle school social studies teacher at Cara-Durham Middle School in Greene County, a little bit south of probably everyone else that's on this call. We're partaking in this virtual Summer Institute. For today's argument, I brought an item that I have sitting on my table and I'm working with right now. It's actually a folder. I'm going to bring it over here. And it's my folder for the C3WP online scoring conference that I'm a part of with the National Writing Project. I've been through a little bit of training this week and last, and next week is the actual scoring conference. And at the conference, we score student papers from across the country for research purposes. And we use that feedback at the writing project to improve our writing curriculum. So this is an important part of my experience at the Capital District Writing Project. It's given me a lot of different opportunities, and one of those is to work within the National Writing Project. And this is my 3rd scoring conference now, and I'm excited to say this time I'm actually a table leader in the middle school group. And it's really the best professional development I've had at the national level, because it gives me a sense of hands-on learning. I'm able to use the AWC, which is the Analytical Writing Continuum, to look at student work by different categories. And then I'm able to bring some of that language back to my classroom. And one of the most important things I've learned through the writing project, both locally and nationally, is the importance of asset-based scoring, and to look at what's there and to focus on the writing, not the faults in a writer or criticize the writer themselves. So I'm really excited, and I hope that as you begin your journey in the writing project, you find something that you're passionate about and you continue to stay with us, and you will be amazed at all of the different opportunities that come your way.
My name is Tom Lester. I teach 9th grade and 12th grade English at Niskayuna High School. The artifact that I have chosen to share is just a normal composition notebook. Participating in the Summer Institute last year reminded me of the importance of using writing as a as part of the process of thinking and not just the product of thinking. One great piece of advice that I heard last year was to focus on one or two things from the Summer Institute and try to bring those things to your classroom. No doubt you have learned so many things, but you can't do it all. So just focus on one or two things. So writing in composition notebook was one of those things that I tried to bring into my classroom with more low stakes writing prompts and also the deliberate act of writing with my students. I recognize the importance of modeling healthy risk taking and modeling vulnerability. So that's all I have. I hope you're all having a great time. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Clegg. I teach Spanish at Guilderland High School, and I have a little dice here. I use dice in my classroom for various games and things like that, and I think I wanted to share it because the things that I create, I'm very creative in my classroom, and I share those things with my colleagues as I create different games, either virtually if they are, digital games or whatnot. But I think it just kind of demonstrates the fun that I like to put in my learning for my students. And it's a big success because the kids always cite that they enjoy the different activities that I give them because it's a variety of ways that they can access things. And I think that directly kind of relates to my leadership trajectory because students saying that they enjoy those things. And I shared one activity with one person and they were like, oh, this is great. You should teach this to the department or give a workshop to everybody in the school. And so creativity for me, I think is meaningful because it lets me explore some of those fun things and work with the kids and help them out. But it kind of also directly correlates to a lot of myself as a teacher.
Hi, everybody. My name is Aaron Thiel. I joined the Capital District Writing Project in the summer of 2006, and I am currently the principal of Latham Ridge Elementary School in North Colony. And before that, I worked for 14 years in the Brittenkill Central School District, predominantly as a kindergarten teacher. And I brought with me today an index card. And for me, it represents the challenges and opportunities of trying to infuse writing into administrative practice. And my current faculty and staff know that when we are at a faculty meeting and they show up and there are index cards scattered around the tables, that they're going to be doing at least a little bit of writing near the end of that meeting that's going to be shared with me. So I think when it comes to teacher leadership or administrative work, there are always these little crevices where we can squeeze opportunities for writing and reflection. And they may not present themselves every single day, but the opportunities are there if we look for them. And even if somebody takes a few minutes to jot down a few lines on an index card, that's an upgrade from doing no writing on that particular day. So for me, whenever I take out my pack of cards, I know that I at least have found some very small way to protect some of that space for our teachers and our staff.
Okay, so for this part, I'm going to do my best to contain my gift of gab, because like many better teachers, talking is not something that I particularly struggle to do. That said, my summer was just amazing. It was, to me, something that encapsulated some of the best elements of teaching. It simultaneously pushed me to be my best while providing me with people who affirmed all the best that was already in me. And I not that I've been teaching a long time, but I haven't found anything that resembles or even approaches how much I felt I grew from the ISI in regards to any other type of PD. It was amazing, but more than just the structure of it, it's the people in it. And I love my writing group. I love my cohort. A lot of the people that I went through with, we still are in contact, and we still end up working on projects together. People in my cohort, we worked together earlier in March when we first were out in quarantine. We worked together on so many different things, and I think that it's amazing that this is a sustained community. And it's not just a community where we are about just the pats on the back. We're about improving our craft, because I think something that to me defines someone who goes through this, defines people who choose to embark on this journey, is that you're not someone who's going to be satisfied with reaching a benchmark. You want to be better, but not just for yourself, but because our kids deserve that. And that shared feeling of we need to be better and we need to continue to move forward because our kids deserve nothing short of the best. That is something I truly love about the ISI.
This is such a loaded question for me. How did the ISI shape what I did in the classroom that following year? I went cuckoo bananas, and I recommend that you don't do what I did. I went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and I had the students journaling every day, like 2 or 3 times a day for homework, for the starter activity. And then I felt like I had to grade every single thing and read and comment on every single thing that they wrote. So I was taking home, composition piles every night to read and comment on every small entry that they had done. Like I said, I went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And because I wanted them writing more, and I wanted them using Spanish, and I wanted them writing poems and doing this and that and the other thing, which was good, but I wish I would have just told myself, like, calm down. Like, pick one thing. Pick 2 things. You don't have to do everything you learned in the Summer Institute in your first year. Like, pick 1 or 2 things. But I kind of reinvented everything at once and then was driving myself insane. Until one day I reached out, and this is the other big thing, like, reach out and ask people. I reached out to one of my fellow colleagues who had also been through CDWP, Chris Missoura, and I said, Chris, like, how do you English teachers do this? How do you have them writing all the time and reading all of their work? And he looked at me and he's like, we don't read all their work. He's like, it's impossible to do. It's an impossible task. And he's like, do you, have someone, an administrator, read over every worksheet that you create? Or do you have someone read every email that you create or whatnot? He's like, no, like, it's a lot of it is just practice building and endurance building. So he's like, he gave me the permission to give myself a break. He told me, give yourself permission to not read everything. So once I started that was probably halfway through the year. And I said, okay, kids, we're going to be doing like 1 entry for homework and that's it. They were happy because it was, less that they were doing. But then when I collected them, I had them like star the one that they're most proud of and the one that they'd like feedback on. And so I was reading 2 entries per student, or which was less. So that was how my year was. It was crazy. And I was invigorated, but I also didn't have like family at home. I didn't have kids at home. So I was just like going home and like reading stuff from, 4 until 9, which it wasn't healthy boundaries for my life and my brain either. So take some of the ideas, but don't take all of the ideas for your first week of school. that's my best advice. But that's what I did right after my summer institute, and I drove myself insane. I went crazy a little bit, but that's just some personal wisdom.
My experience in the Summer Institute really supported my thinking around how we do things like give the youngest writers among us, and in my case, kindergarten students, how we give them a lot of choice, how we send them messages about what writing is and what it's not, how it can be used for even a very young student to claim some agency and some turf, as Donald Graves would call it, and to really plant their flag and have something to say. And it also challenged some preconceived notions that I had around writing needing to adhere to certain types of adult standards. So we had many conversations and had seen presentations from inquiry groups around things like grammar instruction and usage and mechanics. And I think one of the things that the Summer Institute did for me was to give me kind of like the calm and the confidence to know that, yes, all of those technical aspects of writing are going to come, and they do all play a role and occupy a certain space of importance, but they shouldn't necessarily be the starting point of our instruction. And I think that when you're a primary educator, you're very used to having kids approximate things. You're very used to celebrating the smallest bit of something that they get right, like the initial letter of a word. And so while I think I was comfortable with some of those things heading into the Summer Institute, by the end of it, it had confirmed some of my beliefs and challenged others and really helped me to go further in my instruction with young writers.
So I've been a part of the writing project since 2013 when I went through the Summer Institute. And in that time, I've had a lot of different administrators at both the high school and the middle school level. I taught at the high school for several years before I moved to the middle school full time. And there are a lot of things I've learned about becoming allies with administrators and how to use that to help students. So one of the first things that I found really important is that I communicate with my administrator all of my work with the writing project. And early on, I didn't do it as much, except for when I came back from the Summer Institute, because I didn't feel confident. But now I share everything. I will go back and I will say, here is what I learned. Here are some strategies. And here's why I think we need to follow more of this type of professional development in our community. I also have used my ally with my administrator to become more involved with the civic engagement issues over the past few years. In the 2016 election, my students participated in Letters to the Next President, and in the 2020 election, we're working on the KQED Election 2020 project, in which students create commentaries on issues that matter to them. And part of using that forum for expressing student voice is recognizing that students are often going to choose controversial issues, and I don't want to stifle student voice. So I've had to go to my administrator and say, this is a project that I'm passionate about. Here's why it's important. It not only leverages student voice, but it also teaches important writing skills.
Yeah, this one's going to be fairly easy. I'm sure I'll still talk too much, but it's going to be an easy one to answer, because everyone that you've seen as a leader, I count myself so lucky to have been able to work with them on projects since my SI. I mean, Amy Salamone works in my building. Like, I get to work with her. It's amazing. It's ridiculous. So cool. And recently just completed some work with Christina on a project, and with Kelly and Nicole, as well as Amy and Christina. We did some work back it was around when quarantine first started, and we did regular meetings every week. Some of you, maybe many of you, potentially even all of you, we were able to attend at least one of those. And so that was a fantastic way that that happened. But even on a local level, a lot of the teachers in my school, well, in the English department at least, have gone through the ISI themselves. So one of my coworkers, he was also in the focus program with me, and so we had a shared section of students with my U.S. history and his English 11 students, and so we collaborated on a couple of different projects and we did some things in common. So really, it's been an all-around amazing experience.
I think for me, my greatest allies are the other CDWP members, the other people that have gone through the ISI. You can always reach out and email, one of your other cohort members with a question or a frustration, or, can I workshop my lesson plan with you for my observation? Like, the other people, I think, have been my greatest allies and resources that I've gone to the most. Certainly with the writing groups that I've continued to be a part of as well. I'm plugging in here because it's about to die. So that's definitely keeping those connections going, either with your cohort, even with one or two people in your cohort that teach the same grade level or that teach in the same type of school or whatever, keeping those connections open, going to events, meeting some of the other members, those were the greatest places where I found strength.
I called on some allies in 2009, a group of teachers for whom I continue to have tremendous respect to this day. When we realized that we were having some hallway conversations and planning period conversations around being opposed to our district's decision to implement a particular reading screening tool that we felt was an inauthentic measure of kids' literacy development and progress. And we had circulated an article and been discussing it, and went and met with the principal and talked about some other ways that we might be able to meet this universal screening mandate that was on the horizon. And we were not successful in changing the mind of that administrator. She was receptive to the conversation and really took what we had to say to heart, but we were not successful in that case. But the reason I'm telling that little story at the beginning is that those people that I was gathering with in the hallway ended up becoming my school-based writing group. Later on that year, I issued an invitation to those folks to come in before school once a month and sit and do some writing together, maybe talk about an article, just have a professional conversation. And that group stayed together for several years, even after I transitioned away from that district into the district where I currently work. And we no longer meet. Several members have, retired. We've all had kids and, had our lives go in various different directions. But the arc of that writing group was very supportive and connective and important in my professional life. And one of the things that surprised me in calling on those allies was how willing the people were to do the writing and engage with that. And I was also surprised at how central the writing that we were producing, even once a month for 10 minutes, how central those teacher-produced texts became to our group and really formed the foundation of it. And we ended up using writing to wish our retiring members farewell, people said some nice and supportive things when I was transitioning, out of the classroom and even out of the building and out of the district. And we decided that we were going to keep that group together, and we did for a while. So I have a WISE CDWP colleague, Chris Missoura, who I'm sure many of you know by now, who likes to say that in life there are arcs to things, and maybe the arc of this particular writing group has reached its conclusion or has terminated, but that in no way lessens the importance that it has played in my professional life and my growth and development as a teacher, as a principal, as a dad, and just as a human being. So those are my allies, and I love them.
So I think even when I went through the CDWP, the Summer Institute, at first, I didn't really feel like I had leadership. Like as a teacher, I still felt like a new teacher, like a younger teacher. Like there were others that knew more than me or that did more than me. Like what did I have to contribute? So I think that, everyone's journey is specifically theirs. And for me, I think my leadership really grew after the ISI. I loved the ISI so much that as I got invitations to various different events that they were hosting throughout the year, now that I was, on that list, I just kept saying yes, and I kept going, because I liked the thought, I loved the people, I found them very inspirational. You always left with an idea or two or three. So I just kept saying yes, and I just kept going to the different meetings. We had things to say that were of value, and it was my writing group that said, yes, you should present at this event, or yes, when they invite you to give a workshop, you should say yes, you have value in what you're saying and what you're doing as a language teacher. So I think for me, a lot of it was much later after the ISI that I started to grow that. So you might be feeling after, you've done your ISI, you're like, I'm a leader now. And that's okay too, because you find your voice as you move along in the process. But my best advice is to just keep saying yes. When we invite you to a Saturday seminar, if you're able to go. It's always worth it. You always get something from it. And it just helps you in your thinking and whatnot. So just say yes. I think that was the best things that I ever did for myself were just saying yes and going to CDWP events. I've met some of the best people and forged some amazing friendships and just grew as a professional too, in my own mind and my own thinking. So
teacher leadership wasn't something I had really given any thought to prior to the Summer Institute. And I think over the course of those weeks, I was presented with different models of leadership, and I no longer saw it as being just one thing. And I saw the skills and the dispositions and the stances that people take as leaders to be different depending on context, and definitely saw leadership as being more fertile in terms of possibility than I had before. So for me, I became more involved in the writing project itself. I was allowed to and invited to present my demonstration lesson from the Summer Institute at a Saturday seminar, and in some other forums, in some professional development work that we had been doing in some surrounding districts. And then the following year, I was able to give a paper presentation with some colleagues from the Writing Project at the NCTE conference in New York City, and had those opportunities a couple of other times at other conferences during my more active period with the Writing Project. And those weren't things that I had seen myself doing prior to the Summer Institute. And I think in terms of leadership as being this thing that confers a formal title on you, sometimes that does happen. So I did become the K-5 ELA teacher coordinator in my school district. I decided to enter an administrative program at SUNY Albany, and I would not be a principal today without having gone through the the Summer Institute. I know that to be true. That would not have been something that I would have sought. And I think one of the very formative moments for me was having the debriefing session from my demonstration lesson with some of the CDWP leadership, and having them share with me all of the things that they saw in that lesson that I hadn't seen myself, and all of the things that they thought this lesson could contribute to a broader conversation that I had just never, ever considered before. So, and so that has continued for me. I am fortunate today to be a building leader, and that's a position that I've held now for 8 school years. And I think that, my leadership capabilities and capacities continue to develop, but one of the constants that has remained for me is that writing has always played a role. Whether it's me writing myself, or writing with others, or writing at a faculty meeting, I've just noticed that there's always a role for that writing to play, and have gotten more comfortable even saying that sitting down to write, and sometimes write publicly or in community, that in and of itself is an act of leadership. That is something that can pay tremendous dividends for all of us. And it's probably not done as much as it should be in our regular educational settings or the contexts in which we work. So even those small things, the writing, the sharing of lessons, the making your teaching practice more public, those are all leadership steps, on a trajectory. And maybe you start taking those steps and you end up somewhere with a more formal title bestowed upon you, and maybe you don't. But the educational world and universe needs that leadership. And I hope that each and every one of you look for those opportunities.
For best advice, I've got to say, be true to who you are. You guys have seen a bit of it with my playing around with whatever random selfies. Honestly, guys, that's probably taken me longer than recording the videos because I was stuck doing different poses and whatnot. But the thing is, if you're yourself, kids are going to be able to tell that. And if you're yourself, then your true heart comes through. And I think that being authentic with who we are, with our peers, with our administration, with our students, with parents, I think that's one of the best gifts that we have as teachers, is to be able to share an earnest and genuine human connection with another person. Like, isn't that amazing? The fact that we can form bonds with people, and that's like, we get paid to do that as a living. And one of the best parts is you get to be yourself while doing it. I love that. It's really like a dream scenario. And when I say dream scenario, we're going to ignore all that happened when school shut down, and when, school building shut down, to be clear. But I really do think that being ourselves, it's amazing, and it unlocks your classroom. And in my few years of teaching, I believe that it helps unlock your potential. Because instead of wasting time trying to be the teacher that you saw on Pre-Marriage of a Teacher that you see people talking about on social media, when you be the teacher that you were meant to be, your kids are going to move towards being the students that we know that they can be. And I love that. I think that as evidenced by the fact that you chose to spend time in your summer, especially this summer, working and trying to develop yourself professionally, that really shows a large part of who you are. And that's not something that you can let go, whether you're a new teacher or a vet who has 20 years of experience. That same work ethic and that same approach of constantly wanting to be better, that is part of being who you are and being true to what we say on paper. And the more that you're able to be yourself, I think the better off it's going to be for our students, and the more that you'll enjoy your career. Again, I will give the disclaimer that I've only been teaching for a few years, but I still love it.
I have 2 very brief bits of advice for anyone who is returning to the classroom after what can be a transformative Summer Institute experience. And the first thing is, try not to take on everything all at once. I think that the Summer Institute can connect with those elements of our teacher selves that are rooted in things like advocacy and activism, and wanting to make a lot of change, and change that is very necessary. And certainly there are some changes that we can't wait to make. But in terms of taking your teaching practice and holding it up to the light, and examining it very closely, try to extend yourself some grace and not throw everything out if you have the inkling to do that. You're going to need to pick and choose the spots in your writing instruction that you want to change, and some of that change may be very substantive, but I would just encourage you to be intentional about that, and to expand from there, and to have the confidence to know that once you've taken on this piece of your practice, then you can take on this piece. And change is necessary, but there won't ever be an age in which we do all of it all at once. And then the last piece of advice I would have is advice that I got early on in my career, from my mentor and a teacher who ended up having a tremendous influence on me, both as a teacher and a person. And I'm not going to share his exact advice. I'm going to paraphrase it because it was a little bit profane. But the gist of it was, some days you just need to know when to say, let it go. So for me as a kindergarten teacher, that meant knowing when to look at the kids and say, you know what, I'm going to get a lot more out of you as writers tomorrow if we go out on the playground right now today, because that's what you need to do. And I think that there are moments in our teaching lives where we've got the curriculum and the pacing guide and the assessments and the pressures that each of us either put on ourselves, or those external pressures that can seep into the walls of the classroom. But there are days when you need to look at the kids each and every day and say, what do the young writers in front of me, the learners, the people with whom I am charged to love and protect and instruct, what do they need in this particular moment? And do I need to walk away from the thing that I thought I was going to be doing something else? So those are just two things that I think have stuck with me, and I hope that you find them to be of value.